All right, coming to you live from the setup in my childhood home. We have this all set up so that I can come home and visit my parents. I'm coming home for Father's Day, and so I decided to bring it's the wrong shoulder. I'm a little disoriented here. The lamp back. The lamp is super back, and now we also have a terracotta warrior. That I got in China when I was 12, I think. I don't remember, but got it at the Terracotta Army. Pretty sick and awesome stuff. You know what else is sick and awesome? World Cup qualifying. I've been looking forward to making this one for days because obviously I love World Cup qualifying more than anything. And I promise you I wouldn't be making it though if it wasn't going absolutely buck wild. But this shit is off the chain. So I left you, I believe 3-4 days ago, we did an initial recap of how weird World Cup qualifying has been, but you kind of expect things to self-correct after that point, but it just hasn't happened. I made a video about the Cayman Islands getting its first ever World Cup qualifying win, beat Antigua and Barbuda, which is fantastic. The Cayman Islands then followed that up by having to forfeit their next match. I'm not making this up. This from Sweeper Pod, but the Cayman Islands did not show up to play in Cuba because a lot of the players on the team, or at least many students in their squad, feared the potential loss of U.S. visas if they went to Cuba. So the Cayman Islands, after picking up their first ever World Cup qualifying win in their first match of the group stage, then had to hang a 3-0 loss against Cuba because the team couldn't go play in Cuba because the players in the team were worried that they would lose their US visas if they went to Cuba. But that is just the start of the madness. Now, CONCACAF actually kept the rest of the madness to a minimum, particularly on Sunday, but basically through all of the matches. There were no big upsets. Jamaica took a 3-0 lead against Dominica. Dominica scored 2 goals late to make it 3-2. So we almost got to some wild nonsense, but there was no wild nonsense. But Africa, on the other hand, gives you zero break from wild nonsense. And on Sunday, we were treated to a draw between Namibia, which is basically a sentient desert, and Tunisia, which is a desert with hummus, right? And there is a difference there. Tunisia, the desert with hummus, actually managed to beat France at the World Cup, if I'm remembering right. Namibia just made its first ever AFCON. So these two are not created equal, but Namibia did manage to turn out a draw and is performing and running right with Tunisia at the top of their group right now. Tunisia with a win would have been able to separate at the top of the group, and Namibia, they've decided to hang around. And so honestly, how could you not root for a sentient desert? Huge apologies to Equatorial Guinea, who had to forfeit their first 2 matches in the group because Emilio Nsue was being fielded ineligibly. But if you're an avid watcher of Zealandism, you already know about that situation. Senegal managed to survive Mauritania to try and keep things normal. DR Congo survived Togo, which was a necessary result. But let's turn things up a notch, because Monday and Tuesday is where a lot of the matches were played. And on Monday, alarm bells started to ring for what had been, up until the last World Cup, Africa's most successful team. Look, I realize the World Cup is 2 years from now, but we are at DEFCON 5 for Nigeria missing consecutive World Cups. Nigeria missed the last World Cup because their goalkeeper made a terrible error in the final playoff match. Nigeria looks like it's going to miss the next World Cup because it blows, because it sucks. Look, Nigeria had the longest World Cup qualifying streak out of Africa until the last World Cup, but all of a sudden, explain this, riddle me that. Benin. We're talking about a country that's named after the tumor that's not cancer, right? Benin, I've often thought, is disrespected. They're in West Africa. They produce solid players that are able to kind of come through the French leagues. They're part of that pipeline. They're like a lesser, Ivory Coast or a lesser Burkina Faso. Even Burkina Faso's had a lot of success recently. But Benin went down early and then scored 2 goals in the first half and just didn't relinquish it. And that means that the group that Nigeria is in is full-blown chaos. And that chaos was exacerbated by results that we're going to talk about later. So I'm not going to show you the group table yet, but Nigeria is in like 5th out of 6. You have to finish first to automatically go to the World Cup. Second, you go through some really elaborate sort of playoff system that feels almost like Squid Game because only one team gets out alive. And you don't want to be in that. You really should be winning your group. It's Nigeria, for crying out loud. That wasn't the only bit of chaos. Uganda had the lead at halftime against Algeria before the 2019 African champions managed to turn that around and keep themselves top of a group where Mozambique is knocking on the door because Mozambique was able to get a win over Guinea. Guinea was a team that I thought actually had a chance to do something, but now all of a sudden it's the team with an AK-47 on its flag that is tied with Algeria for that automatic qualifying spot. Ghana played an absolutely absurd. If you're not watching this, you're missing out. I'm keeping it a stack. Okay, Ghana played an absurd match with the Central African Republic, led by Jeffrey Kondogbia, or if you play EAFC or you pay attention to football at a high level, you'll know who Jeffrey Kondogbia is. He's the only player for Central African Republic that plays, major club ball, or at least has. Well, Ghana takes an early lead. Central African Republic takes the lead. Ghana then fights back with 2 goals from Abdul Fatawu, I freaking love, and Jordan Ayew, who is just an ageless wonder for this national team. Then they make it 4-2. Central African Republic makes it 4-3. And at the end of it, this was a match, by the way, that Ghana absolutely needed. And they got it, right? Because Ghana needs this because Comoros also won't stop winning, right? Comoros, a country that if they make the World Cup, you're going to have a bunch of people sitting there going, I didn't know Comoros was a country. This is probably the death nail to Central African Republic's hopes. I mean, there's 6 matches left in the group. Getting a win over Ghana would have been it. Ghana absolutely battling its way. I mean, showing signs of life, at least more than Nigeria, being able to pick up this win in the first place. And it is amazing that the day was so chaotic that I am just now getting to the fact that Egypt drew Guinea-Bissau, and Guinea-Bissau had the lead for a good portion of this match until Mo Salah scored in the 70th minute to pull Egypt back level, which means Egypt is able to maintain its stranglehold on the group. But a win from Guinea-Bissau would have certainly spiced things up when you look at this table. But Egypt, as hard as it is to do in African qualifying, does look like it might actually have a comfortable campaign. It has injected some distance between itself and the presumptive challenger Burkina Faso and the surprise challengers Guinea-Bissau and Sierra Leone, apparently. But Tuesday is where the real African action is, and we haven't even gotten to the craziness in Asia, which involves North Korea and a bunch of Chinese fans descending upon a Singaporean restaurant. But it's all going to make sense. We start with the African champions Ivory Coast drawing Kenya on the road. Playing on the road in African qualifying just must be the ultimate nightmare. The draw for Ivory Coast keeps them top of the group, but Gabon's knocking on the door. Burundi is knocking on the door somehow, a team that's just not even supposed to be that good. In the Gambia, a team I do actually think is good, just sucks. And then Seychelles down here, they have a minus 20 goal difference. So we've got one team that's playing up to what we expected. My poor boys at Mali, the best country that's never been to the World Cup, in my opinion. They have been for like 2 or 3 cycles. They're playing against Madagascar. Madagascar gets a red in the 16th minute, and Mali still can't get a win. This is in the Comoros and Ghana group, which means Mali is currently in 4th behind Madagascar, 4 points out of an automatic World Cup spot. They're going to have to get incredibly hot through the last 6 matches to be able to pull this out. Being behind Madagascar after 4 matches, I mean, come on. I loved the animated films, but you can't do that. We highlighted it in the previous video. It actually happened. South Sudan hosted a match between Sudan and South Sudan. These two just had a war to separate. They used to be one country. South Sudan might be seeking to rejoin after the Sudanese national team showed them what for with a 3-0 win, which, oh yeah, by the way, keeps Sudan in an automatic World Cup qualifying spot. Look, I've been following World Cup qualifying for 15 years, right? This is something I have always been passionate about. It has never been this weird 2 years out from the World Cup. This is the number of teams from Comoros to, I mean, we haven't even gotten to maybe the weirdest one yet. Now, Sudan in particular being top of their group is made even crazier by the fact that apparently there is a civil war going on in Sudan again. Now, I was made aware of this because somebody commented on the last one of these that I made and went, it's crazy to mention Sudan and not mention the civil war. My apologies for not being an expert on geopolitics, but thank you for telling me, because that sucks, obviously. Hope everybody's okay. I know that's not normally how civil wars go. But on the bright side, they are top of their World Cup group, and that would be an amazing human story to be able to pull through that. They're playing their home games in Libya, according to a Google search. I don't know if that's like a permanent thing, but their qualifying games have been in Libya. Honestly, the way they're playing, keep playing in Libya, dude. It's working. Speaking of Libya, their brief run at the top of a qualifying group was ended by Cape Verde, who now created a 4-team 2-point traffic jam at the top of Cameroon's group because nothing is easy in Africa ever. Libya, Cape Verde, Angola, and Cameroon are all within striking distance of an automatic spot to the World Cup right now. And then there was the match that I was supremely focused on, the match that I was absolutely fixated on. Rwanda and Lesotho, because unbelievably, Lesotho sat top of their qualifying group after 3 matches. The landlocked country, literally inside South Africa. Rwanda, a country famous for a horrible genocide that has rebounded from it and actually built up a decent national team now. I should say competitive national team. And these two teams right around the top of a qualifying group that includes South Africa and Nigeria. We're back in that qualifying group now. And Rwanda managed to go to Lesotho, who actually plays his matches in South Africa, according to another very authoritative Google search. But I mean, that's where they were playing, the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban, South Africa. I know things. I talk and I know things. Well, Rwanda managed to pick up the win, and that means that Rwanda is top of the qualifying group, and it also means the door has been thrown wide open for basically everyone. South Africa and Benin are both 1 goal behind on goal difference. Lesotho's 2 points behind. Somehow the only team that seems out of it is Nigeria, because Nigeria has played 4 World Cup qualifying matches, which are kind of important, against Benin, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Lesotho, and won 0 of them. They are in 5th. They are only ahead of Zimbabwe. And honestly, they're behind Rwanda and Lesotho after 4 matches. Just reset the entire national team at this point. That makes no sense. Nigeria has a lot of the best players from Africa. Period. End of sentence. What is happening? I couldn't tell you. Something's got to be rotten inside of the national team setup, but you know where it's not? Lesotho and Rwanda. Rwanda is going to, the next set of qualifying matches, I believe, is March 2025. So this is the last we're going to hear of this for 8 months, right? 9 months. 9 months. Last, we're going to hear this for basically 9 months. And Rwanda will be sitting at the top of a World Cup group for those 9 months. That's where they're going to be sitting, stewing in it or enjoying it. Honestly, if you're Rwanda, you're relevant on the big stage. Right now, Lesotho comes out and plays South Africa in the next match. If they can find a win in what I can only assume is a ferocious derby, then they're right back in it. But South Africa is look, South Africa thought they were going to be competing with Nigeria here. You're just waving a green flag in front of South Africa. They have to compete with Benin, Lesotho, and Rwanda for a World Cup spot. I mean, look, those teams obviously are better than anybody thought, but South Africa's just better than that. And they haven't been to a World Cup since they hosted it in 2010. And they feel like they got robbed in that match against Ghana in World Cup qualifying for the Qatar World Cup. So this is an opportunity and a half. But my goodness, if it's anybody but South Africa in that top 4 that is going to the World Cup, we have an amazing story on our hands. And to me, what World Cup qualifying is about, outside of the drama and insanity, is those amazing stories that it has the opportunity to create. Because, yeah, Nigeria and South Africa would be able to give Brazil a better game. But the opportunity for a nation like Rwanda to heal its international image finally by being able to get on that type of stage, or Benin to basically announce itself for the first time on that kind of stage, or Lesotho to do the same thing. Right? Finally teach people that it's not pronounced Lesotho, because it's not. Google it. I swear. I know I'm doing like reverse American psychology here by actually looking up how to pronounce countries beforehand, but I've been making these videos for a while and I get bullied into saying countries right eventually. But we leave Africa behind and we move to Asia, where things also got incredibly weird. And I'm going to do this one group at a time. Group A was an interesting group where there were basically 3 teams for 1 spot. There was Qatar, who had already automatically qualified because as bad as they are at the World Cup, or they were at the World Cup, Qatar's national team's actually pretty good relative to the rest of Asia and competes for qualifying regularly. Then there was Kuwait, India, and Afghanistan. The situation is India's playing against Qatar, right? If you watch Zealandism, you already know about this situation. And Kuwait and Afghanistan are playing. India and Afghanistan are basically tied on points, right? So if everybody draws, India's going to go through. If India loses, Afghanistan draws, they go through. If India wins, nobody's going to be able to catch them. And if Kuwait wins and India doesn't win, Kuwait goes through. Obviously, very simple. India takes an early lead against Qatar, who's playing basically an international friendly since they're already through. Kuwait and Afghanistan stay locked at 0-0. And they stay 0-0 until late in the second half. But in the second half, weird things start to unfold. I made a whole Zealandism about it, so I'm not going to talk about it again. But there's basically a goal where the ball looks like it went out. It isn't called out. Qatar scores, makes it 1-1. 3 minutes later, Qatar scores again, takes a 2-1 lead, sinks India, and right as that's happening, Kuwait scores. And so Kuwait jumps ahead of India and Afghanistan, which shout out to the Afghan national team for giving it a real go. Wouldn't have guessed that at all. Really the best fight the Afghan national team's ever shown. And that is, wildly impressive from them. They actually finished ahead of India in the qualifying group based off of, I believe, results between teams, but Kuwait gets the second spot. Here's the final group. Let me actually organize that. Top 2 spots, you go to the next round of World Cup qualifying for Asia, which includes 18 teams, which will then be boiled down to 8 and a playoff. Group B was more straightforward. We had Syria playing against Japan and North Korea playing against Myanmar. Syria wins, they're safe, but they're playing Japan, so that's probably not going to happen. So if North Korea beats Myanmar, they are going to the next round. I don't know why everybody is so surprised that North Korea's national team is decent. Japan spanked Syria. They beat them 5-0. Syrian national team has declined a little bit, and North Korea won 4-1. North Korea played a very good game. We got 4 goals from my boy Il Song-ri, who's allegedly, apparently 20 years old. He is also apparently a me from the old Wii video games. That's that stunning resemblance to, I mean, I know this guy from grade school. Like, we obviously can't trust a thing they say, but what we can trust is these guys are from North Korea, and they've been to the World Cup multiple times. And every single time North Korea has gone to the World Cup, they've at least dusted it up with somebody. The last time North Korea was at the World Cup, they only lost to Brazil on an 81st minute goal. It was 0-0 up to that point. And I've done videos about North Korea's national team before. One specifically about Han Kwang-song, who was a North Korean wonder kid who played in Italy before the UN kind of shut down expat North Korean workers. And there were some interesting stories that came out about how much North Korea focuses on developing their players. Obviously, it's a bit of a crapshoot because there's not a lot of cross-pollination. Like, they basically just drill their players inside their country, and then World Cup qualifying is where you find out if those players are any good. But clearly, they don't suck. Like, obviously, North Korea is just a human experiment in just, I don't know, it's a hermit kingdom for a reason. Basically, nobody knows anything about it other than it just seems like horrible stuff is happening. But you know what? Their national team managed to get a result, and I'm sure the dear leader has informed his people that North Korea has now won the World Cup by advancing to the 3rd round of World Cup qualifying. And then the next group, the final group of intense interest on the last day, involved China and Thailand, battling for a second spot underneath obviously dominant South Korea. Singapore was the other team in this group, and this is where the whole Singaporean restaurant thing comes in. You see, China comes into the final day with a 3-goal advantage on the goal difference. All right, 3-goal advantage. And, they have a 3-point lead, should be fine, right? That's not really, because they're playing against South Korea, who's obviously very good, while Thailand is playing Singapore, who's obviously very not. Which means as long as South Korea is able to beat China and Thailand is able to win by at least 3 goals against Singapore, which is absolutely in Thailand's wheelhouse, then it will be able to advance. As these 2 matches play out simultaneously, the first goal goes to Thailand in the 37th minute. The wonder boy, my favorite Thai player, Supanat Muenta, the Thai wonder kid. He scores the goal in the 37th minute. But then Singapore scores in the 57th minute. So things are looking dire, and China's still 0-0 with South Korea until Lee Kong-in scores in the 61st minute to make it 1-0 South Korea, which means Thailand needs 3 goals. Now, Thailand leaves it late. They get a goal in the 79th minute, and then they get a goal in the 86th minute. At which point, China and Thailand are tied on points and goal difference, right? And China is only okay on goals for. So we are sitting in a natural balance here, where China is into the next round of World Cup qualifying by the absolute skin of its teeth over Thailand. But then Thailand doesn't score again, even though Thailand had 35 shots, 13 on target, obvious dominant performance. They had 97 dangerous attacks. I don't even know what that means, but it sounds scary. But a hero was born in this game, and that hero's name was Hassan bin Abdullah Sunni. Right, this guy is the goalkeeper for Singapore's national team. He is 40 years old. He plays for Albirex Niigata, and he also owns a restaurant. And so he puts on a masterful performance, makes 10 saves for Singapore. Any one of those, if he makes a mistake, China is out of World Cup qualifying in the place of Thailand. And so Chinese fans actually, they blow. Let's see if I can find it. They blow up his restaurant in order to support him. Here is an actual video from Channel News Asia. We're just going to roll with that being okay. of people like Chinese fans in his restaurant to support this goalkeeper for helping them stay alive in the World Cup. How could you not love something like this? He became an overnight celebrity for his heroics against Thailand that helped keep China's 2026 World Cup hopes alive. And here is a picture of him wearing an Oakland A's t-shirt, serving up what looks like some absolutely delicious food. And he also served up some fat mitts of justice to Thailand to send China to the next round of the World Cup qualifying. A hero. You have Confucius, you have Sun Tzu, and you have Hassan Sunni, obviously. Just to round out the teams, Oman and Kyrgyzstan, Iran, Uzbekistan, Iraq, Indonesia. It would have been a stunner if that flipped, but it was possible on the final day. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, big win for Jordan on the final day to finish first, although it didn't really matter. The UAE, Bahrain, Australia, and Palestine. Rounding out the teams advancing to the next round out of Asia. Every other country from Asia is now out of World Cup qualifying with 2 years to spare. But the real winner of the international window, Aiden Scipio. This is an actual player for the Anguilla national team in CONCACAF. They had a terrible performance, lost 8-0 to Puerto Rico in World Cup qualifying in their second match of the window. The first one was closer, but they also lost. But look, that's not the main attraction. Who cares about the score? This dude's rocking a waistband to keep his hair in check. So he is the number one winner of the World Cup qualifying window. And that's everything you needed to know about World Cup qualifying. So there you go.